don't mean to interrupt the conversation, but probably today it's one of just, because we really want to facilitate some conversation. So, and some students I know have to leave early. I want to make sure we get to the stuff we want to talk about. Because I would imagine, I don't know, here we've talked about some of these things for quite a while, but this conversation can probably go on, and it maybe will. I'm not saying we'll have more meetings, but maybe through emails, through phone calls and connections, maybe some of the conversation will start. Feel free during this, more coffee, more water, more breakfast. It's here for you all, or you wait to the end. I wanted to start first with just introductions. I didn't do name tags, we wouldn't be facing each other or anything, and it's pretty informal. I'm Dave Rovick, I'm the Assistant Director for Student Activities, so do all kinds of activity stuff. One of my main jobs is all the clubs, and I'm also the Direct Advisor to the Knights. So I work with all the student organizations on campus. That's kind of my role here. And I've been here for about 4 years, but I was a student from 93 to 99. And yes, that did include some grad school, so just undergrad for 6 years. Then I worked in Florida, back to California for a bit, and then ended up back here, so I call this place home. So I don't know if someone particularly wants to start, or you want to start at this table and just go around, maybe say your name, why you're here, what you do, and yeah.
I'll start. Okay, I'm Teresa Van from the Vanessa Behan Crisis Nursery, the volunteer coordinator.
My name is Eric Hoffman. I'm the current president of the Knights.
Hi, I'm Tim Hinkle, I'm the president of the Spokane County United Way.
Hi, I'm Brenna Hollick. I was just recently appointed one of the service chairs for Seasons.
I'm Brady Exman. I'm also a freshman with Brenna, and I'm the other service chair for the upcoming year of Seasons.
I'm Peter Kelly, and I'm one of the service chairs for the Knights.
Nadine Vanstone, St. Margaret Shelter, which is part of Catholic Charities.
And I'm Jody. I work with Nadine at St. Margaret's as the volunteer coordinator.
I'm Kayla, and I was a past service chair.
I'm Jordan. I'm the past president of Knights.
Good morning. I'm Andrew, and I'm the current vice president for the Knights.
I'm Sheila Garrity. I'm the business administrator for the Salvation Army of Spokane, and I am a Gonzaga Prep and Gonzaga University.
Actually.
Yeah.
I'm Kyle and, with the Salvation Army, and I grew up in New Zealand, so I'm not a Gonzaga.
I'm Casey Booth. I am one of the outgoing service chairs, and I'm also leading Reality Camp this year.
I'm Sheila Canavan, and I'm vice president of the Seasons.
I'm Dallas Lamock, and I'm the current service chair.
I'm Allie Scott, former vice president, current president of the Seasons.
I'm Trisha Brookbauer, and I am a former service chair, and I'm now the Seton's junior advisor.
I'm Hannah Vogue, and I was the volunteer coordinator for the Knights and Setons for Union Gospel Mission.
I'm Debbie Paletto, Union Gospel Mission, director of advancement.
Jeb Berg. I am the budget officer at the Center for Community Action and Service Learning here on campus. I am a Gonzaga grad, and about 6 years ago I was a Knight.
Jerry Schwab. I work at the House of Charity, and I went to Gonzaga for 12 years.
Wow. Just a few logistical things. If you need the restroom, it's just down this hall. There's two little halls to the left. Sometimes you can't tell they're bathrooms. It looks like you're going to someone's office. If you go in, just look, you'll see a door. They're just single bathrooms, so there's no men's and women's. Even though one's pink and one's blue, because they used to be men's and women's, now there's no reason to do that. And then for this setup, I do apologize. I know April's very busy, but I thought 8 a.m. we were reserving in March. There was no other rooms. This is the best available room to host something like this. There was none of our meeting rooms available. So we're trying to make it work. Like, this isn't ideal, as you can tell, and have a conversation. So if at some point maybe we're done with breakfast, we want to move out, but it's the best. We came in yesterday, I'm like, how do we set these tables up to fit everyone? And you can blame me and the few Knights who helped figure it out. We're not very good at geometry, so. What I want to start with you is a quick, some of you have worked with Knights Seton, some haven't, but a quick overview, and I don't know if Jordan or someone in the organization wants to just tell a quick overview of what the Knights Setons are and they do in just a couple minutes, so people get a sense of what your organizations consist of.
Okay, so the Knights and Setons, the Knights have been around for about 80 years now here at Gonzaga, and the Setons for, I want to say, about 60. So we're a service leadership organization here on campus consisting of 30 males and females, and our three pillars are brotherhood, service, and leadership. And so service is our primary aspect. So what we do is, in about October, we choose a charity that we want to serve for the year, and we commit to 2 hours a week for the school year. So that's 120 man-hours a week going into that charity, and then as well as committing our funds and philanthropic efforts towards that charity. So this year we raised $19,000 for Union Gospel Mission, and I think 3 years ago they raised about $70,000. And so one of our conversations that we've been having all year around tables like this is how can we be more sustainable for the community, because we understand that sending 120 hours a week into a charity and then pulling out at the end of the year is not the most sustainable thing, as well as giving up to $70,000, giving a surge of manpower and money. So we invited everyone here today to talk about how we can help the community out in the greatest way. And perhaps the way we're doing it is the best way, but I guess that's why we have you guys here today. And we also want to talk about what some of the greatest needs are in the Spokane community, so we can discover more of a niche to be aiming at for the next year and for the years to come. So, thank you all for coming, and I hope you enjoy your breakfast.
Do any other members want to add anything to that, or? For logistical reasons, it is one of the differences of this group, it's all sophomores. So that presents news. Like some people mentioned they were the outgoing and incoming, because most student organizations, especially here, you can be any. In fact, our rules kind of dictate you have to be open. This is one of the groups sometimes we're like, well, they've been here, there's tradition and history. So they're all sophomores. This year we did make a slight shift, and it kind of goes in line with the conversation here. Is we asked them to have some senior leadership, and I think they actually proposed it in the end. So this is the first year they'll have 2 leaders of their organization who are actually juniors, so they're people who participated. Their president and vice president will be their president and vice president up until October of next year. So it will be, which is, I've already seen some difference in terms of, because I was always there when they picked 30 new people, and the next meeting was like, so how do we do stuff? And they had some advisors, and it was a great experience for them to work out. But maybe not so good organizationally, and especially one of the things I've talked about, when we talk about clubs, something like, oh, clubs, we do bake sales, and the Seatons actually sell muffins. They don't bake them. But what this club does is like beyond what your average student club does. I mean, the amount of money they raise, the amount of power is just phenomenal and great. So how does their organizational structure support that? So that's one of the reasons we ask. As a university, I have 90 clubs, and my entire job isn't that. I couldn't help them as much as they need them when you're raising that much funds. So we're trying to talk about their structure and how they help. So one of the first steps was adding some of that more senior leadership. We're developing a board of advisors for them, which will be former members, juniors, and seniors. They've always had a family relationship, they call it, which has been very helpful, but it's very informal. So some years it works great. Some years it's like, oh yeah, I went to Florence and I forgot, kind of moved on in life. So we're kind of formalizing with a few members to kind of stick with, support that, and give the alumni, or as we would call it, more buy-in to the group in the long term besides just that 1 year. So, and Jordan said eloquently what we're trying to do here today is how what they've done in the past, how has it maybe worked for those that know, how has it hasn't, and they have their own insights, and then also to hear what the needs are, because I think with the amount of resources they have, they've had a great impact. I think most people probably agree the net gain is probably extremely positive, but I think we want to make sure, because there's such significant potential with it, that it's being used in the best way possible. Some other highlights, Jordan mentioned that a few years ago they did raise $70,000. There's amazing potential with money there. That brings some logistical stuff on the side of the university in terms of who's the donation going to, who manages that. I mean, that's not a couple hundred or thousand, that's big money that people get interested in. You know, when they donate $1,000, they start calling up, where did my money go? Most clubs, once they get it, no one ever asks. They typically have done 1 charity year. I know 2 years ago we tried 2, and it worked. The president then said he liked it. It was a balance between House of Charity and Boys and Girls Club, so it brought the people who liked kids, which has been typically a big pull and draw for night scenes, and also kind of the homeless males and stuff like that, a different draw, which sometimes they like, but it's, as Todd refers to, I think, like the grimy underbelly sometimes, or the darker side of things. It's not as fun as, oh, kids. They liked it. They got to see both. It gave people opportunities to do both. From a service standpoint, it seemed to be functioning better in terms of actually having service opportunities. So I don't know if someone wants to pose some questions down here at the bottom. If someone has something they want to start with, who's either worked with or suggested.
I was going to say, we didn't really go over how organizations have been selected in the past. I mean, we just kind of briefly.
Oh yeah, Casey or one of. Do you want to talk about how you guys have selected the organizations? That's good.
So if you guys want to chime in, you or Kayla. Basically what we did is we went to Todd Dunfield, who leads Castle. This is our community service leader, or community service guy on campus, and we were like, this is kind of what we're looking for in order, we kind of wanted to work with, we wanted to work with people kind of who needed the most help, somebody that we could work directly with people. And so he gave us a list of about 90 organizations, and yeah. And so we wrote up a letter basically explaining what we did. What all did we put in the letter? It was just kind of like a basic outline of the year and what we were looking for, and if you thought you fit that, then you please send in an application. We ended up getting about 30 back, and kind of read over the apps and narrowed it down to about 7, and then we made then we went and visited those 7 at their place, and from those 7, then we narrowed it down to about 3, and the narrowing process started in the end of August, and we didn't really finish till about the second to last week in September. And the last week in September, we brought all 3 of those here to Gonzaga, and they presented over in one of our auditoriums to the entire Knights and Setons group. And then after all 3 of them presented, we had a voting process and picked together the Knights and Setons thought was the best organization, which was UGM this year.
So I think that's been the process in the past, and that's been handed down year after year. That's exactly the process that we did 6 years ago. And there's been a lot of discussion, especially in my office by Todd and some other people, about the fairness to the organizations in the community, and then also the idea that, and Jordan touched on this, and I think we've all been kind of talking about this, but is it really a good sustainable system where we're going to pair with one group for a year, in some cases create wholly new programs for a year that the patrons or the clients at these different service sites become attached to, and then students move on to the next year, and the whole process starts over, and then all of those services can just kind of go away. And I think the idea is, how do we create something a little more sustainable within a similar framework where students can feel like each year is a unique experience for them, but how do we create a partnership with different organizations in the community that's going to be more beneficial overall and more sustainable year after year, and understanding with student schedules, every summer they're going to be gone, every winter break they're going to be gone. I mean, there are those pieces of logistics to work out.
Hannah, do you think you could touch on the sustainability factor of us working with you guys, and then I'm not sure if we're going to be here next year?
Well, it's been a really great experience for UGM having you guys step in, because it made us look at where we could have volunteers step in and provide more opportunities for the community to get involved. With that said, you guys are leaving, so there are a lot of things that you guys met huge needs for us, and those are going to be some gaps, but we kind of look at that as an exciting thing. Greg, who oversees our high impact volunteers, the ones that are really consistent with our ministry, is meeting with me, and we're going to try to fill that with the community members and recruit people to come in with that. So it's been great because it's opened those doors, but it is leaving them open, but that's kind of a good thing I see it as, because we can get the community involved, and we see the importance of these volunteer positions.
What kind of program, was there one specific program that you set up for the Knights and Setons, or would they work with?
They actually were serving in 29 different areas in our ministry, and so how we went about it is I sat down and interviewed each of these students and kind of found out what their desires and passions were, and try to plug that into our ministry where they could be most effective. And so we dispersed them quite a bit. Most of them had one other Knight or Seton with them. where they were volunteering, but some were by themselves and some were in larger groups.
Did you consistently see the 60 people come 2 hours a week?
Not all of them had projects that were 2 hours weekly, but would be more hours in a chunk of time. Like we have a group that is creating an art room in our women's shelter, and so they'll come and they'll serve, you know, large amounts of times, which it averages out to be 2 hours, to some even to 3 hours. I think we have one girl she's serving 5 hours a week with us. And
so it was really more, you met with each Knights or Seton individually and found what best met their schedule?
Yes.
Just a quick overview of kind of the 4 years that I've been here. So the first year they did Kennel Kids. Worked really well with student schedules because it was early in the morning, afternoon. It was a set time that was easy to schedule. Like I know UGM having Hannah, it's like here's these different spots, different time, takes a lot of logistics. So Kennel Club worked well. The sustainability issues brought up because they started a great after school, before school program, but their tradition is next year's group's gonna pick a new one. One of the things that helped out with that is they had a huge amount of money. I mean, back then they were raising 60, so it was like, hey, we give you this, and the principal, yeah, that can help sustain us. Some of the members loved that. They actually continued a club, which brought in another 20. They started a Kennel Kids club, and that was by their own choice to do that, which was very helpful. But once those people graduated, the energy lost and the money dried out. I know Kennel Kids, our club, went away. I think the Holmes Elementary program did change a little because obviously the resources to keep that going weren't there. At Center Point that year, it was one place. Similar to Hannah, I believe they hired someone specifically, because I know when Spike got it, he was elated, but it was like, holy cow, here comes all those hours. And they had some tough issues with what Knights and Setons wanted to do and with what Center Point needed. Because at one point we were sitting in meetings, it was like, why can't we open these services later? And one of the best comments was one of the people on their board said, that sounds neat. He goes, but this place in particular and the patrons that come here, they need regular routines. As much as I'd like to say we're gonna offer this for a year, if we cut that service off, my daughter who goes here, it would be devastating to her, and they don't get that change in routine. He goes, it's probably true for everyone, but especially people in this facility. And so that was the struggle for Knights and Setons. Why can't we just add more things on in this particular place that year? And yes, we like that it doesn't work for them or their people. At least that was kind of what the board said. And then the next year, they, like I said, did House of Charity and Boys and Girls Club.
Jerry can talk to that.
And Jerry can talk about how that worked. But from our point, service-wise, it seemed to work. I heard the least number of people didn't show up, I don't know what I'm doing, or I don't like what I'm doing. Which I'm not saying we overwhelming that, but every year we hear some, and it's probably routine for volunteers. I don't know if Jerry wants to add, from your perspective, how it worked out, or what you did.
Well, we created a Sunday night meal for the downtown, and that we were able to do that through the students helping. And it was another way to connect the students to the population so that there was conversation and relationships developed. Same thing is true of the other things that were built, is that once it was subtracted, it was subtracted. So for a while it was an enhancement to a gap in services. One of the logistical issues for social service organizations is to have the staff ability and take the time. What you described in terms of your endeavor at UGM is phenomenal in terms of the staff time that took to logistically interview. I mean, I was just adding up the hours. Which some social service organizations right now are so strapped to meet the needs of the daily population that there isn't the ability to extend. I mean, you're taking one step forward in that you've all of a sudden created another layer of service, but the amount of people power it takes to build that layer is also immense. So I've got ideas of needs in the community that when we have that discussion, that part of the discussion, I've got some ideas to share, but I'll wait till the appropriate time.
May I ask a question? I mean, just, you know, you've used the word sustainability a couple of times, and I guess I'd just like to get some clarification about what does that mean to you, because there's kind of a lot of components around that. I mean, I get this idea of there's this transition, if you will, from one year to the next. but is it the sustainability within the context of the group, or is it the sustainability of the delivery outside that you helped create?
It's kind of like the ability or the sustainability of what we've done for the organization. You know, we've set up the biggest example that we have is the Kennel Kids. You know, we set up this club. It's awesome for these kids. They get to talk with Gonzaga students. Then we finish our year and all the kids are just like, well, we're done with service. You know, and it's just kind of like, well, they had all this stuff to do, and then it just kind of faded away. Another example was Boys and Girls Club. They kind of thought since they got it last year, they might be able to get it again this year, and they got this huge stipend. And so they called us and told us that they have this huge stipend, and we were just like, what happened was her assistant or something forgot to send in an application. And so we felt terrible, but like we'd already told another group no, that we couldn't accept their application, so they were like really devastated, and we just felt really, really bad. But like, and it's just like one of those things where it's like, well, when we keep asking ourselves, are we, you know, we're a service organization, but are we really helping the community, or are we doing this more for ourselves, you know? And like, that's definitely a big concern that I've looked at this year is, in service is, yeah, it's a lot of fun and it makes you feel awesome, and it's something that I love to do, but how much of it are we doing for ourselves, and how much are we doing it for the community? And I really think that's a meeting that, or this is what this meeting is for, is to kind of figure out, you know, this isn't, Knights and Seton shouldn't be about us bettering ourselves, which in the end, if it does, that's great, but our main goal should be helping out the community, and I think that's what we're going to try to figure out here. So.
I mean, I don't see them mutually exclusive, so I mean, so really don't beat yourself up, I guess is the point. Because regardless, that sense of self-worth that you create is terribly important, so don't lose sight of that, I guess is the thing I want to reinforce for you.
You know, having been involved with Knights and Setons for a long time now, St. Margaret's has never been selected, but I feel like we've been very involved because every year we end up in we're the bridesmaid. So we've been through the process a lot of times, and then we are also very involved with Castle and a lot of the service learning that comes from Gonzaga. And so thinking about this meeting, a couple of things occurred to me. One is that in the community right now, the Spokane community, at least in the homeless services arena, which is what St. Margaret's works in, there's a real push to do more coordinated funding and services, which what that translates to is let's work with other partners, other funding partners in your case, to find out what the needs are that are already identified in the community and then support that, rather than being this piece out here that does its own thing, but really doesn't interact with that piece of the community. So I did talk to Jerry Allard, who is she runs the city's Human Services Department, and they do a lot of funding, like through the Human Services Advisory Board, and about the possibility of perhaps you guys partnering with them so that they could help make those funding decisions, and that would be coordinated with everybody else. The other piece, if that wasn't so much of an interest, the homeless piece is the Inland Northwest Community Foundation, which I haven't talked to, but I know that they are a great conduit for many grantors, and you guys could be a grantor in that system where you decide what your priorities are, and hopefully you can maintain that those same priorities, commit to that as a group, so that there is that continuity from year to year, and then have them help you go through that process. There's a fiscal accountability there. There's a coordination with the rest of the community, and I think that's a great starting point. It takes away the piece where you get to decide who you fund, but it also really says to the community, we trust what you've decided are priorities and we want to support that. And I think that's huge.
you know, and I'll just
United Way
just throw out a commercial really. I mean, as you describe what you've done, literally, as Kyle and some others knows, that's literally the process that we're in right now, is that deciding and meeting and interviewing and talking with. I would tell you organizationally, we went through a comparable process not too long ago and said, what is it that we want to try and accomplish? And know that we've got to create a longer term vision for the organization, for our organization, and in turn then for the community, to create what is it that we believe that we can accomplish over an extended time period, and then identify specific kinds of goals and then outcomes that we would be looking for from the organizations to achieve, and then go through a process. And frankly, it's going to continue to evolve. It isn't a line has been drawn here and this is the way it's going to be moving forward forever. We know that it needs to continue to change, and that the questions that you're raising become terribly important. So again, I really do want to applaud you for what you have done. So again, continue to support that and understand that you're doing great things. But I think also to do what you're doing here now is to try and figure out, and this is the struggle that I've got a bit, is this kind of this 1 year shot, if you will, is to be able to try and define, is there a longer term view that you can take? Not that it ties the hands, if you will, of who follows you, but does it create some sort of a vision for what the group wants to accomplish? And then in that it helps to then maybe define, you know, from 1 year to the next, we can become, you know, focus in this kind of arena and help create some sort of sustainable change. And I think that's probably the one thing for you to really think about. And I think your point of working with the organizations to say, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? And there might be then that either a short-term vision, if you will, or thing that the organization needs to, let's just get this done, that we've been wanting to do for a long period of time, and it furthers the mission of both organizations, yours and the ones you're working with. Or it helps you work with that organization, and I think that's a bit of what our process has been, is that we've really been trying to reach out to the community and listen to them and say, what is it that they need and want and aspire to, and how can we help make that happen in conjunction with others in the community and bring other people to bear on that. I think that's probably the other thing, and that's the point I think that you made, is that there really is more than just you and your group, but how you are able to potentially bring others into this, so that as you step aside, that energy capacity may still be there in some way.
If you looked at a 5-year plan and targeted an issue that you dedicated yourselves to for 5 years, that alone might allow continuity. If your end goal was the production of 10 units of affordable housing in 5 years, the funding and the efforts would go toward mobilizing that issue, gathering partner resources, identifying a particular location. I can tell you that there's 3 churches in the downtown area that are on life support, and their buildings are historical, their congregations are aging, those buildings are subject to demolition. So when you look at the Spokane community, you look at existing resources that may end up dying because of lack of support, then your organization could look at one of those and supply it with the kind of nurturing it needs, and then you could potentially, Gonzaga, in partnership with Whitworth and the faith-based community and community organizations, could foreseeably create something that wasn't in existence in this community, and it was a major gap. that the social service organizations fell short of, and you could fill that gap for the next 10 to 20 years with renewable student energy each year. And that's kind of a picture, a broader picture.
Yeah, I think, you've got lots of options, and there's going to be pluses and minuses of whatever you do. There's a great plus to doing a long-term tackling an issue, or staying with a similar organization or the same one. I mean, there's some great strength you can do. At the same time, being able to go like Union Gospel, you've helped start something that they are more than capable, I would say, to keep going and to develop. So you've given them an injection, you've given them some impetus, you've helped them open their eyes, and now they're moving ahead. So that's something that may not happen if you've been focusing over here. So again, there is pluses and minuses, and I think you hear all of this, and you've got to sit down and battle it out and sort of work out what do we want to do, and know. And I always like writing something down and putting what's the plus, what's the minus, sort of trying to work that through and determine where do we want to be in that. But one thing that and I think all of us organizations can say, is there is plenty of need in this community, and especially now. And if anything, it's only going to increase over the next couple of years. It's sort of like, what I've noticed is that the stimulus came in and helped the social service agencies and the poor sort of stay at a certain level. Now all that money's going away, and that's going to drop. So even though the economy might increase, there's a lot of people down in the lower levels here that are going to be in a lot of trouble in the next couple of years. So there's, I don't know, there's lots to do. And whatever you do will be greatly appreciated for whoever you do it.
And is it antithetical, if you will, for the organization to identify, a 2 or 3 year kind of vision or goal of the kinds of things that you'd like to work toward? Because again, it's really that becomes, I would think, really critical for you to see where is it that you'd like for it to go. And there is a little bit of what I'm understanding is a lot of starting and stopping that goes on, and as valuable as that is, and because I don't want to dismiss that, because that's always really important. People need to step in and sometimes can't stay and have to step away. So that's a valuable resource. And I'd say either be satisfied with that, or challenge it a bit and say, do you want to look and try and go a bit deeper, which is really what these questions seem to begin to address, and some of the things you've said. Can we go a little bit deeper, or should we?
Can I ask a question to the community partners, more to, kind of like we talked, the stepping in, because Todd is, and I tend to agree with this assessment, I think how many, if they were to continue the same way in terms of let's just talk service, how many organizations do you think could take that 120 goal stepping in? Because I think that's the big difference, is, and then step out and handle it, because it seems like UGM got so many different things going on and they were able to do it. How many organizations, if they were to say, hey, we want to continue it, how many organizations, and we've got 30 applications, but how many could reasonably accommodate that where it's successful for them and for the Knights and Seatons? It's not a third of the group struggling with where do I fit, they don't have enough for me to do, or I'm just standing someplace. Is there a number, and
The smaller the organization, the harder they're going to, they just don't have the infrastructure to the extent that larger organizations do. And I think that's where you see that falling away.
It's like a tsunami of volunteers, and then they're there and then they're gone.
So if that's not so perhaps if you continue on the same route, that should be more of a consideration, the capacity of the organization. Because the truth is, the smaller the organization, the more they need the money. And the more they're going to want to have that money. And so if you're doing it based on the presentation, the last 3 groups that you have come in, and oh, this sounds good, oh, I like, what I might be doing, and you don't consider capacity, then that's when you run into those kind of issues. And unfortunately, it's the smaller organizations that could so much more benefit from those dollars. Those can be critical dollars, but then critical when they leave too, at the end of the year. So
I think that touches on a whole other issue too that I've spoken with Todd about. I know that we've talked about in some of our review board meetings is the idea of divorcing the two to some level. That you don't have to pick one organization that you're going to fund and serve at, that you could have a philanthropic effort that's not necessarily directly tied to the direct service piece. And therefore, you could be stretching out your volunteer hours over multiple organizations for a year, and you could have a concentrated philanthropic effort for one or two organizations. But that does create difficulty because it's hard to gain excitement if you're not serving at that organization. So.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think one of the main struggles of Knights and Setons in the past is we have absolutely no forward view except the year that we're involved. And we have no sense of longevity. You know, we're college sophomores, we're loving it, we do great service, and then we're done. And I think one thing we're trying to do, like Dave touched on the leadership structure, Eric and I are going to be the presidents of Knights and Setons as juniors. So, you know, we went through it last year, we did our service at UGM, and I think our hope, I mean, Jeb raises a really good point. Should we split them? You know, in my core, I go, oh, we couldn't, because that's how Knights and Setons has always been. So we're hoping with the new leadership, we're going to be able to implement some new ideas and change stuff. Maybe the better structure is to push something for 5 years. You know, but we need to start being more open-minded, and we need to start changing the traditions that aren't working.
Yeah, I was gonna go along with like the tradition factor. I mean, other than last year with House of Charity and Boys and Girls, it's kind of that thing of, well, you know, we put it to a vote and everybody's like, oh, we want the one organization. And we're just kind of like, at first we're just kind of like, should we do? Like everybody's so focused on like, they want to have that one organization, they want to be able to, you know, go around campus and people are like, oh, Knights and Setons, what's your organization this year? And it's just like, that's kind of the mentality that's been beaten in by like, we have like a older system, so like not mentor, but you know, I have like a, what we call like a little in our group who, you know, his name's Zach, he's a Knight right now, so I, you know, hang out with him, and if he has any questions about Knights, you know, I come to him, you know, we get lunch and stuff like that, and so it's just kind of like, when you have that person and your older's telling you, oh yeah, this is what we did, we worked with this one organization, and like, I mean, it's great saying that you should choose two, but if they, I mean, this is how many you have here, you have 4 current Knights and then a couple olders that are here. Hearing this, like, it's great, but then you go and you try and tell 60 others, or 54 others that, oh, we should probably break tradition of what we've been doing. And it's like, I don't know if you guys have any advice on like how, because like, I mean, we tried last year to kind of be like, maybe we should choose 2, but like, people just didn't want to listen because what everybody was saying and what tradition was. And I don't know, this is the first time that we've had juniors in Knights and Setons, so maybe having juniors in Knights and Setons being like, guys, we probably should go a different route, maybe will help. But I definitely see picking more than one organization as it's what the community needs, and you know, spanning out 120 hours during the week to 2 or 3 organizations is probably a lot better than throwing 120 into one. And I'm just wondering if you guys, any of you.
I'd like to speak to that from UGM. We assigned Hannah to manage the Knights and Setons because of the magnitude of numbers of people and the hours of service to delegate without our ministry. Fortunately, we're the size of ministry that we had, what, 29 different areas to offer. So it was a win-win, but that does not mean that it was an easy win for both Knights and Setons as well as for Hannah's managing and our ability to assign somebody to manage that, where smaller organizations don't have that luxury that we were able to afford this year, which we're grateful. I'm going to go back to your goal of being servant leaders and speak to the our heart, speaking now for UGM, of providing an atmosphere where you could exercise that servant leadership. It's kind of a classroom, as I heard Dave say last week. It's a classroom without desks for you students. It's a very valuable one. And it's okay to feel good, but even more importantly, it's okay to know what this year's experience will have built into your character that will outlast your time even at Gonzaga, that will influence your decisions and your attitudes beyond. your education here. And that's where we get really excited to know that we got to be a part of that. And as well as what you brought into our ministry. But that will continue to be a challenge by the nature of the size of your group, who can take you on. Like Nadine said, that was probably one of the precursors of why she's always been the bridesmaid.
Actually, no, we were too organized, I think.
Really?
We had electronic volunteer sign up set up on Shiftboard. I mean, we were too slick. We had the Women Kids thing, but we just were too, we did not demonstrate enough of a need in the sense of poor pitiful us pick us. And I'm not saying you did. I'm not saying that. That's been our experience here.
That's one thing Todd and I worked with a lot, and they've improved upon, I still think, is when I took over, I'm like, let's see how this goes. And they have great conversations. Like, honestly, I go in there thinking some things, but when they get to a group, they make some good decisions. But when Todd came to me once, because he said some people who didn't get picked were unsure, I think that was the point, is it was like, hey, we want to give to the community, whoever wants stuff, come sign up. And I've been challenging them, like, how fair is it for someone, because you guys put a lot of time. And if they show up with something for homelessness or kids, and you haven't talked and there's no interest in kids, it was almost a waste of that person's time. They're trying to get it to narrow, still be open. I think that's maybe we can switch to needs if we want to talk about, because I've tried to get them, and they've written a generic statement. They're very hesitant to pick needs because they want to see what's out there. And they're fresh. I mean, at that point when they're deciding, like the new group now that's been the big deciders and still will have heavy influence and make some decisions, they're freshmen, many of them not from this area, and they're trying, and so they're like, we want to see what's out there, but I've tried to challenge, it's not fair. So they've gone that direction. I hope we continue to take that step to define, even if it's not, I like the longer term, but even if it's just for that year, here's what we think we want to do. So that someone who's like, oh, we're not applicable, we won't spend our time applying, versus more of the, tell us what's out there and spend a lot of time in this proposal and show up and find out. Or, yeah, I don't know that we'll ever tell people exactly why, because I don't think maybe that's appropriate, and you never know. I mean, sometimes it's just what you feel and they presented, but I think we would have a hard time explaining to anyone, based on the application, why did one get and one didn't. It would go back to things that, well, why didn't you tell us that ahead of time or something? So we've been working on that every year. Todd's helped them a lot with their application to make it a little more transparent. Still some work to be done, and that's a process. Actually, one of the reasons we have this meeting now is it's one of the first things they do, is because they're getting ready to go home in 3 weeks, do some work over the summer, then they try to get going to get 60 members working. So.
Does it seem feasible to think about the 5-year plan or a 3-year plan for you guys' group?
To have a theme?
Yeah, have a goal or a...
No, I'm not laughing. I'm not at all. It's just, it's tough, not only for the tradition standpoint, but more of the every year is a new group of 60 people. So,
can you build any foundation as a group that there could be some consensus on?
There's 2 reasons that I could see a problem with it. One, in the fact, say that next group was to continue working with UGM. What if they're passionate? I mean, obviously it's not all of them, but like, what if they're like, well, I really wanted to work with kids, and they didn't choose the organization. We chose it for them the year before. So like, I foresee there could be problems, and it might work out perfectly. Yeah. But I could see that there could be problems with attendance, or like people would not really too passionate.
Are committed.
Exactly. You guys can continue, man.
Jordan, do you want to go?
I actually have a point of clarification. When you say 3 to 5 year plan, do you mean like sticking with an organization? But I'm going to be saying like we want to reach out to homeless children, and then that's our target for 5 years at different organizations.
I was thinking more of, as opposed to picking an organization, picking whether your interest. Well, Jerry had mentioned some options that were, as a group, come up with your 5-year plan or a goal of something that you want to get involved with, whether it's housing or homelessness.
Okay. And I would say too, I mean, there's a lot of topics, you guys have a lot of people. And correct me if I'm wrong, community members, I think you guys could delve into 2 if you wanted to. I mean, if you want to, you guys have 6, I mean, you guys did 3,000 hours at UGM, is that what I heard the other day? I mean,
yeah, a lot of capacity.
I mean, obviously homelessness could take one of those, or education could, but you could probably divide it up and still help both areas and serve. So
and maybe meet then more of the diversity in your group.
the things that you've discussed.
Yeah, and like, oh, did you?
Oh, it's okay. Well, I think that's definitely a good possibility because maybe the first couple of years might be a little bit like transitioning, but I think after the first couple of years, then people are going to get the hang of it and like realize, all right, I'm coming into this, and this is our theme for service for the year. Like I know when I come into be a night or a scene that I'm going to be either working with the theme of education or homelessness or whatever it is going to be, and so I think that's definitely a possibility. And since we are starting to build the foundation with the like board members and with the juniors being the interim interns or whatever. So yeah, I think that'd be a really good idea.
Well, I see a couple of things going on here. First of all, you need to know as college students that you, for us, are one of our favorite type of volunteers because you're committed, you're already committed to education. You're a student for Salvation Army, you're very close to us, you can just walk over. But you also have to understand that when you put being a Knights and Seton on your resume, you're telling a prospective employer that you have a passion for something and you stuck to it, not just your education. So you put down that you went through this process of picking a nonprofit, you volunteered a certain amount of hours, and what experience you gained at that organization you volunteered at. Second of all, I hear some comments about your exit strategy after you're done with that organization that you volunteered for. Well, then maybe your strategy should change to a type of passing the baton when you leave, so that you maybe develop a new volunteer program for that organization that you're leaving. Instead of just cutting the cord, off you go, all of a sudden there's 120 hours of volunteer time that's gone from that organization. For us, we're getting funding cuts all the time and we are losing staff because of it, so we have to now solicit volunteers to take those spots. So it would be a great fit for us, but I'd like to see more of a passing of the baton when you're done, so that maybe you develop a volunteer program for that organization, then you leave.
I agree with that, and just making it a focus of the group to bring the community in to whatever ministry that you've chosen to, and also another thing for the funding, to have these fundraisers and are bringing in these donors to really share the passion and the heart of the ministry, so they in turn continue on with that ministry. And it's not that they're committed to Knights and Setons, but they're committed to the Salvation Army. They're committed to the Union Gospel Mission, because that creates a new layer of support for that ministry.
Yeah, these are all really good points into off what you were talking about, Sheila. It's like kind of a curse that it's new every year, but then it's also kind of a benefit at the same time. Because by the time our littles choose their president, vice president, and they continue like Eric and I are doing now, their youngers won't know that that isn't how it's always been. And you can say it, but they won't be able to imagine it. So in the same way, I think we can kind of use that to our advantage, that 5 years from now, if we choose to implement something like that where it continues for a longer span, they won't know that that isn't how we did it. So it's kind of a benefit. We have to make our decisions smartly to make sure that they're good ones, but at the same time, if we want to do something like that, within 5 years, it'll be the norm.
Well, when I think of how manageable Spokane is in relationship to Philadelphia, Boston, Chicago, New York, any other large community that faces similar issues and economic crises, I just continue to have this vision that Spokane could do something extraordinary and special that steps out in front of the rest of the country. And that when you wonder how can you break tradition, it's by having this spectacular vision that the students come to Spokane and they're a part of a larger community that's the greenest community in the nation, which Portland is. So what is it about Spokane that Gonzaga and others could take to the, as leaders, take to the forefront of the nation in terms of, so you look at Spokane's community as a ripe apple and you start to study it and do something extraordinary, and not just continue to work with the existing structures, but you tie Spokane together, you unite Spokane together, unite various partners so Spokane can go forward. You've got the light rail issue, you've got transportation, you've got housing, you've got all the kinds of issues that Spokane is facing, and then you, maybe as a group of, with all that expertise and passion, you help tie the community together, rather than being singularly focused on one or two organizations. But you look at policy, you connect with the Human Services Department of the city, you connect with United Way and partner agencies. I'm just thinking that's another way to go that could, I mean, forever, because I graduated from Gonzaga a long time ago and continue to be involved with them. I just think Gonzaga could do things nobody has done at other end. You know, why just do things the way they've always done? It's like, wow, Gonzaga is stepping out in a number of different ways, and they're a huge visible entity on a national level now. And so why not have the Knights and Seatons and the Service Learning Department and others do something that is in the top 10 in the nation, that other people haven't figured out because they just keep doing the tradition. So if you sold that to your young folks and said, we're going to make Spokane awesome, and Gonzaga is going to help that, we're going to put them on the map. You know, they're going to have a downtown shuttle service that helps the elderly and helps young people, and get, you know, they're going to do things that other communities haven't figured out.
I like that. Because like you do need that kind of almost shock, wow factor to get people motivated into something else. And the only thing that we have right now is kind of the, this is what, you know, you pick your new thing. But if I feel like if we implemented something like that, that would definitely help, especially having people that have already been there next year, you know, with Eric and Sheila and Alan and Andrew. So
it sounds like you're touching on some needs, Jerry, that like you've already been thinking about. Do you want to talk a little more about those, the needs that you see in this community?
I will. One thing, my sister's the president of United Way in Bozeman, Montana, and after Hurricane Katrina hit, and there was a huge devastation and a huge attention, she organized in Bozeman, Montana, an effort where they wrapped all the downtown buildings with a blue tape to show where the watermark would have hit Bozeman if the flood would have hit them. And it was phenomenal. You know, the community, she thought of that, and the outpouring of support based on that wrapping around the whole community was an example. So my sister is a visionary, and so she's been able to do things. They have an after-school program in United Way has created a sustainable after-school program among about 26 different elementary schools. And United Way usually just distributes funds, but in that community, they become a service provider. They broke new ground. So what we need in Spokane, we're, you know, from 3 to 6 every day, the homeless folks in downtown wander in the cold because the House of Charity closes at 3 and reopens at 6. The women's, the Hope House opens at 8 at night and closes at 8 in the morning. So there's gaps in time where there's folks just out in the cold. There's no service, there's a gap in service. There's existing churches, like I say, who have open space. They're already paying the utilities and the taxes and the lighting, but they're sitting empty. So we have a need for more affordable housing. We lost 400 units of affordable housing through the commercial Otis and Madison being shut down. They stand 2 of those stand empty. So we have loneliness. We have loneliness in the elderly. We have at-risk kids who are in dysfunctional families, and we had a huge dropout. Spokane School District had staggering dropout statistics, which they're trying to remedy. One of the unifying needs that our community has is isolation. People living unconnected, disconnected from other people, whether they're 2 years old or they're 12 or they're 90. We have so many individuals, because that's the nature of our society and our culture, is that we've fragmented, we've dissociated from one another. So in general, there's an issue of a lack of companionship. We need mentors for everybody. or big brothers and sisters are relationships. What we have the least of in this community are relationships. We have a lot of services, but services sometimes fall short of meeting human beings' needs for affiliation or value or companionship.
I went to Union Gospel Mission and held a dinner this Sunday, and it was a really cool closing event for him. One of the coolest things I heard said is, was it Dave, was that his name? It's kind of the MC. He goes, one of the best things I heard is touching upon your relationship thing. He goes, none of you in this room mentioned the things you built or the things you created or the money you raised, and they hadn't. And I think that he was a reflection. I think like 15 people reflected in it. I thought that was a cool thing for him to point out, that they kind of, no one told him to get it that way. We don't sit down and say, we probably have at times, but they see it as, we're gonna raise some money, go help some people and do stuff. But when they reflected and shared, none of them talked about that. They were like, I met this guy, or this one day someone did this and he was really neat. And they even used first names, which I'm horrible with names, so I was impressed with that in general. I think that relates to the relationship part of something this group added in that way and kind of does and has learned to do well, at least this group, but even in the past.
Yeah, I've worked at the crisis shelter this past year, and it's been one of probably the most amazing experiences I've ever had. And it's just, I feel like, and I want to ask two questions, is, you know, kind of, it seems like UGM and then St. Margaret's, it doesn't seem like, a ton of places for women that are, I know there's maybe a couple others, but it seems like there's really, Spokane is lacking in that area. I feel like, from what I hear, maybe you can touch on that. And just also like to touch upon what you said, Dave, about the relationship aspect. Is like they had some stuff for us to do there, but the guy that ran it, Jerry, was like, you know, these women don't have any stable men in their lives, and you know, kind of what they've been introduced to is like abuse and like, you know, whether it be physical or emotional harm. And it's just kind of like, he's like, just go out and talk with them. Like literally, we just sat out there for an hour and chatted with them. He said the difference that we made just in, you know, an hour to a week of just sitting there and kind of chatting with them, and you know, having that stable relationship of us coming every week and us seeing us there. So like, I think that is one of the biggest things that you can do, at least what I learned this year, is just building relationships. Like, and you know, just, I think that helps more than anything from what I hear. But you know, kind of back to the women's crisis stuff.
You know, honestly, if I were you guys and you want that kind of data, we have a point in time count that we do in January every year for homeless services, and I'm sure there's other data out there. I would really recommend that you take the time to just touch in on those. You know, maybe one process for finding out what direction you want to take, if you're going to focus on need rather than provider, is invite some proposals for what people think the greatest need is. And there's plenty of providers, I think, that would be happy to share that kind of information. One thing I think about is, as an East Central neighborhood resident, and East Central is the poorest neighborhood in our city, we started an initiative through the health district last year called Neighborhoods Matter, and they were doing direct service. So they were focusing on young moms that had at-risk pregnancies and then had at-risk births and kids. And what they did was they said, we're going to take this resource because we know it's going away, which is true for all of us. Some of our resources are going away, and we're going to apply it to the whole community. So they met with a lot of community members and decided some directions to take. Like they decided health matters, child mortality rates matter, and safety matters. So out of that came these projects, like one of the schools in the neighborhood's doing a photo voice project. If you've heard of that, the kids have been going around taking pictures of what they feel like is unsafe in the neighborhood, and then they're going to do a presentation to the city council. We started some classes that are free to neighborhood folks, like I go to a yoga class now every Monday that's just got neighborhood people in it, and it's just so cool. So, you know, maybe it's just the way that you become involved in your service. Like,
They would love to replicate that, say, in West Central or Hilliard, who had also applied for that funding. You could use that funding to help pay for that health district person who helps continue to move that along. And I mean, we've got a gleaning project that we're doing in the neighborhood now. We've got community kitchens where kids are coming in and doing, learning how to cook healthy foods. We're talking to the Heiko, which has the sign in front of it. We sell the cheapest beer, smokes in town. We're trying to change that Heiko into a healthy neighborhood store. And we don't have a neighborhood store in our neighborhood. So all those, I mean, there's 100 different ways to get involved. I think you just have to think about what's a good process. And I know for me, that's been a great process. And it is about relationship. I've met people in my neighborhood that I would never have met. And starting to know people on my street that I never would have known. And that's, you know, so something that does that relationship thing, whether it's through the neighborhood churches downtown or, you know, but looking at it on more of a scale, like a neighborhood or this, you know, downtown or the city or something, I would definitely recommend that based on my experience of this last year.
Are there any other community partners that want to touch upon? Jerry talked about some of his needs, either to reiterate or like bigger trends are out, because I know I've read a lot about the high school dropout rate, and I think there's some energy around it. Are there other ones that you maybe want to make the night scenes aware of? And then Kyle talked about the national trend, not a good one, but funding. Are there things out there to just put out to this group? Because if they are looking long term and getting the impact they have, they might need to be aware of things happening in this community or nationally that might, they can go read up on later, but are there, I don't know if that community partner is going to add.
The statistic that jumped out at me the other day, and I think it was 2009, so I doubt that it's changed much, but 47.5% of single mothers with kids under 5 are living in poverty in Spokane. 47.5%. That's extremely high, if you ask me. And so, you know, when you start putting things in those sort of perspectives, you realize the need is great. I'm not sure if that came up, but it's just like, you know, and you can go to the city and you can look up, you know, the road home. You can just download those things and you can read those reports. They'll give you some ideas of the, you know, the need, and B, the way the city and communities are trying to work on some of those issues. But you know, it's there's some scary numbers out there, but you can make a difference in a little, you know, in a way. And again, wherever you volunteer, whatever you do, even if it's just for a year at a place or whether it's a period of time, you're going to make a difference in somebody's life. And again, when you're talking with homeless populations and things like that, I would say even Catholic Charities, for that year that you had that Sunday night dinner, it was greatly appreciated. And even if it went away, that was a year of Sunday night dinners that were probably really nice. And so, you know, if I was a homeless person, even if it was just a year, it's a year better than I would have had. So I'm not sure what the exact best options are or what the greatest need is, because there are lots of different needs. There's needs with kids. I mean, if a kid doesn't get a good start to education early on, they're way behind, you know, and they start dropping behind. Is there someone there to help pick them up and move them on? Is, you know, what I like about students specifically, if you're working with kids, you become their hero, and they look at you and they go, wow, maybe I could go to Gonzaga one day and be like you. And just through nothing that you taught them doesn't help at all, but the fact that you are there and you're a Gonzaga student, you've thrown this, you've given them that hope, which then can give that self-motivation to, which I think is extremely important as well. So your presence in different areas can provide that hope, that dream, especially when you're working with kids.
Another unmet need is not only are the Knights and Setons searching for how to use their resources and their time. Just this weekend I was sitting with the South Hill Church group who were posing the same question. That South Hill Church, which is a well-resourced church, is struggling with how do they engage with the Spokane community and not just sit in the pews. And then at the same discussion there was a bigwig from Fairchild Air Force Base who represented the resources of, you know, the biggest employer in Spokane. And so everybody's kind of trying to figure that out, and it's the needs now are so overwhelming. People are sort of a little paralyzed in terms of which direction do we go, where do we take the next step. So what the Knights and Setons could approach possibly is how do we help people engage within the community who don't know how to engage. So, you know, if the 3,000 hours went toward out into the community to have conversations, and the goal was greater engagement, mobilization of volunteer resources in a unified, collaborative effort. Everybody's so struggling right now that they're all in the forest just grappling for answers, and so when you've got a great, bright group of passionate students who could think outside the box and help with that. The goal would be unifying Spokane. You know, then there's a lot of angles on that, and there's a lot of conversations that could be happening from the policy level to the marketing, you know, to the, you have billboards go up where you try to get messages across, and you pick a theme, you know, and it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen in a year. And you allow the Knights and Setons who've been hooked into that and passionate about it to be continuing to fuel that until they graduate, and maybe they'll go into that career, you know. So it hooks them so strong that they don't just leave after their service time is over. They stay bonded in some form.
You know, so think systemically, think strategically. When you look at the state budget, which I did yesterday, there are cuts across the board. Education, domestic violence, homelessness, there's nothing that's not going to be touched. So, you know, think at that level.
And I would say Jerry touches on something that I think really answers the question that I think we all kind of heard from the Knights and Setons, and I've heard for the last few months serving on the review board. This question of tradition versus like it's our year kind of thing. I think that's your answer right there. To you that are about to leave, it's your year next year, right? But really, you have a great opportunity to take Knights and Setons in a direction it's never gone, and to create investment year after year. So that's I mean, you're building on tradition. You're building something new and greater. I feel like
you're making it late for class.
I know. No, what I was going to say though is like my year we work with L'Arche, and you can go to the back of Harvest House at L'Arche and you can see where there was supposed to be a garden, and it's just weeds. We had this great idea, we had this great vision, we raised all this money and we worked with this group, and that garden is now a visual example of a ultimately a failed project. And that doesn't have to be the legacy of the Knights and Setons. And I'm not saying that is the legacy. I'm just saying for my year, that ultimately is what's physically left over from what we did. You could be creating a program that provides services for this community and creates a relationship with your members that lasts more than 1 year. And the tradition could be that Knights and Setons isn't a once and done kind of thing, but something that transcends your college experience and even beyond your college experiences, which is what Jerry's talking about. So I would challenge you guys to be thinking from a bigger perspective, and understand that it's not about, oh, we raised this money, we did this, we did that. It's about, I was part of an organization that every year does this, or that over the last 10 years has cumulatively raised this much money and provided this many hours to the Spokane community and created these programs. 10 years from now, when you are out there in the world and you're looking at, you're 29 years old and you have a career going and you have on your resume, I was part of the Knights and Setons and this is what they're doing today because of what we started 10 years ago, that's valuable. If when you're 29 years old, you guys did what I did, which was we raised $30,000 for this organization and we built a garden that filled, that's not even going to be on your resume because it's not an impact. So that's something I would encourage you to think about is what's that long-term impact, not only for you but for the community, and kind of tweak it in that direction.
One of the things, I mean, maybe to build off of Jerry what you shared, one of the things organizationally that United Way is doing here in Spokane, again, is not as commercial about what United Way is, but also nationally looking at how do you engage the community? And that literally begins with listening to it and understanding what they want and need. And in fact, we're involved in a specific project through United Way nationally that is helping in that process. And I would tell you that it is very clearly informing what we're doing. And I'm glad to share that with you at some point, because frankly, it is a way to get to, again, the idea is there isn't a single need that exists in this community. There are multiple ones, and there are systemic things behind all of those. And to then figure out then what does a community, whether or not it's a neighborhood, or it's a catchment area, or if it is a specific population, what is it that they're looking for, need, require, and how do they want to get involved? And specifically, education has been one of the things that's been lifted up. High school graduation rates in this community is a clear thing that's been lifted up, but everyone in this room is going to acknowledge it isn't just about that graduation rate, but what is it that you can do with mom or dad or those kids, or where are they living, and why do they have to move 6 times, and how do they pay the rent, all of those things have to be addressed. And there are people throughout this community that want to be involved and they don't know how. And we've had a number of those conversations, and they want to be involved and they want to do something just like you are, but you have to be able to listen to that and then figure out that where can we plug in and then begin to make the kind of change that you want to see. So it does, I think we have with you talked a lot about identifying what that vision is. And I think that becomes a real critical part, but you can't do that without listening and understanding what the community wants. And I think any of the organizations here would welcome that chance to work with you to help make that happen, so that it is actually a reflection out rather than your own recognition of this is what we want to do. But what is it that the community, whomever that is, wants to have happen? And again, I would just tell you selfishly, organizationally, it is something that we've had to learn how to do differently. And it has helped us a great deal. I hope it continues to help us work differently in the community, because this idea of just here's money, we've got an opportunity, that doesn't work. It absolutely does not work. What is it that we want to accomplish, and how can we all work together to make that happen? If there's a lesson to be picked up out of this, a thing to be learned, that would be the most important thing that you could walk away with, I would think.
I think we're getting, it's 9:20, so we technically have 9 minutes left of the last points left. I did mention, by the way, just from a practice, I did mention in the email we're video recording this, so no one objected, so we did record it. With today's technology, if you want a different face, we could probably put it on that later. We'll share any royalties we make off of this. Probably, I don't know how much we'll use it, but a lot of Night Seatons wanted to be a part of this, but we thought if we invited 60, it would turn into more of a presentation or just an overview. So we brought in some key leaders from this year's group and the new one to hear it, and then maybe we'll play this or play parts of it or have it accessible, so if someone in the group wants to, or if we don't get to do this again, it's for next year's group. Because I think there's always going to be that transition, because students are only here 4 years. So if we can keep this of a record of a first conversation, I've learned a ton from this. I'm assuming the Nights and Seats have, and it's kind of overwhelming, it's exciting, but it's also where do we start and go with this? Does anyone have any, do any of the Night Seatons have any last questions, especially since it's...
Not to pick on the new guys, the new Nights and Seatons, but as you can see, they're kind of a little shell-shocked right now. They're kind of a little not sure exactly where the organization is going to go from here. They're not really sure what the organization is. Now, for me and Jordan, Sheila, and Allie, and Trisha, like we've had our year. We kind of, in the beginning, we were the same as them, but now we're kind of looking more in the visionaries aspect. So, I guess my question really is, how can this whole idea of choosing a need, it seems to be the most prevalent and most supported. How can we make it practical? How can we implement it? How can we kind of formulate? Is there an idea that we can kind of take back to the group?
Can you think of like 5 needs, like education, homelessness, health? I don't know, 4 or 5 needs, and do present those to your group. Get some information on the 4 or 5 needs, really generic, and say, okay, here are the needs that are in Spokane. That transportation might be, I mean, there might be some needs, and get those to, and say, here are the needs in Spokane. Let's, before we put out requests for specific charities, let's look at a need. And United Way's done this several times and come up with needs. This year we're focusing on education. This year we're focusing on homelessness. This year, you know, whatever, or for the next 3 to 5 years we're focusing on something. So if you do education, then that brings you into a lot of different things, working in schools or working in food programs, or, you know, different things that help education, working in trying to figure out why families move around so much, and maybe help them to get help with their utilities if that's why they have to move, or their rent or whatever. So that would be one place to start, would be to think of some needs and then choose one of those needs that you want us to focus on, and that gives you a focus rather than a specific agency to work with.
Yeah, I like kind of having this idea back here in my little corner. Thinking about, there's not really a lot we can do to change the process probably for this coming year, but we have a lot of visionary ideas. And I'm wondering, I know when our group sat down to have our charity selection after the service chairs chose the final 3, our basic mindset was we want to be shocked. We want to be pushed outside of our comfort zone. And as it happened, only 2 of the 3 services that were there fit that. But that was what we kept hearing over and over. We wanted to work with the homeless because so many of us aren't from Spokane and didn't have any contact with that type of community. And I think that part did end up working well. But exactly what you were just saying, if we can get that narrowed down early on and see what it is this group is looking to work with and what need that most matches up with before we even send out the applications, would, I mean, I think help the service chairs out a lot. So I think that's a really good point.
And then you help the agencies as well by, if you are looking at education, for instance, and you're an agency like Vanessa Behan, we don't really work with education. I mean, we help that, we kind of fit into that, but you might eliminate some organizations from spending a lot of time in making the application by knowing that you're not going to even fit in the criteria.
Yeah.
I wonder how critical it is too that the volunteers have to go to the organization that you're sending the money to. Because for me at St. Margaret's, I wouldn't mind that you guys didn't choose to come every week for a certain length of time, but there's times when I have a mom moving out, or that I'm moving a warehouse, or that I'm planting the garden, where I could use a concentrated group of help. Even if I wasn't the chosen organization, it'd be nice to have the contact and say, anybody out there, any Knights in Seton want to get in on something, and I could use you as a resource that way, and they could get involved in that way. I mean, and that's something easy to implement. That doesn't take a whole lot of conversation, and it can make a direct impact on some of the stuff I'm trying to get done each day.
Just to speak to that, I know we've tried to do that. I don't know how, I guess it hasn't really been effective if that's how you're feeling, but we partner with the one organization, and then we do a lot of work with the university, but we're also very open to working with other organizations in Spokane. I know we've done work with Vanessa Behan, we did a phone-a-thon, and we work with Catholic Charities, sometimes like raking leaves and things like that. And so I know online on our webpage there's a form that you can fill out if you need volunteers for some kind of event or something, and we're always looking for events where you might need like 10 Knights and 10 Setons on a Saturday to go out for 4 hours and help you. And I know that usually the groups with the people that we get in this organization are more than willing to go out and go above and beyond their required amounts. So I guess just for everybody here, just so you know that that's kind of a fundamental element to this organization, is that we are willing to work with anyone. So just to remember that if you ever do have a need, to contact us, because we can probably most likely fill it.
So the best way to do that would be through your website. There's the contact info on the Knights and Setons piece.
Jordan can probably speak to that.
So
go ahead.
It's actually, it's called the community website, so it might just be a Gonzaga-based website, but we can email, we have this volunteer form we made this year.
Yeah.
This form we made this year, we can email it out to all of you guys if you want to.
That's for me, it's that continuity between, okay, so there's a person that's in charge of it, and then they're gone. It's like, oh, I wonder who the new person is.
Yeah. One thing, just from a pure practical university standpoint, it's the first time we have gonzaga.edu/community, and anyone go there and it lists some events, but usually we limit those. But it does have a list of all the clubs and organizations, what they're about, and current contact. I mean, it's the best. It's as current as when they change, if they change it. So that has been, I've tried to get clubs, I'm glad, because it's been a big transition, but that should be, for the Knights and Setons, I'm going to make sure they use it even more this year. But if you guys need any clubs, there's other clubs that help. You can go to that site and it's helped communication-wise. To reiterate,
I've had some clubs that have, I think that's the piece about relationships, right? You get to know someone. Like, I've had some clubs that, like, they come play right me. Jody, we have 6 people looking for something to do. Oh, yeah.
Well, just so you know, you had a problem knowing who's in charge. I came to this club's office, even I didn't even know a third of the clubs. Oh, I'm the president. How come I didn't know? I go, how would I know that? Like, now that we have a web-based system where they can tell us and they're not dropping off Post-its, it's vastly improved our internal communication and external. And I want to reiterate Trish's point, that's something we kind of skipped over, because they do a lot with the community. You guys will be amazed how much they do here. They work all graduation weekend. They work all orientation. They work every Sunday at masses, 4 of them. Pretty much when Castle has big events like Service Fest, they do a lot of stuff. It's actually one thing I challenged them before, is they used to never say no to an unhealthy level. I mean, they were burning themselves out, and people would just line up at the door not knowing and be like, oh, we need you to help set with this. And I finally said, you guys can say no, and it's probably good for you to say no. And they've worked on that a lot. That's why they created that form, so it wasn't just students who could show up Wednesday night and go, oh, I have this big event, we need 10 people to set up chairs, and they were like, it was a nice ethic at some point. They've done a great job. I think the form, I think now we need to get it out to people to say there's a process, and we want to help as many people as we can, because they do leaf raking, they love it, they've done the phone-a-thon.
Yeah, they've been great at the phone-a-thon.
They've helped people move, I think, for Catholic Charities before. Somebody,
I'm
they
sure.
called up and said,
Catholic Charities is big, so I just haven't found the key yet. So.
Yeah.
If you thought of, on a practical level, if you looked at it from an asset mapping strategy, so you take the 3,000 hours and you distribute it among a wide scope in the community and start to identify assets. You go to the faith-based communities, individual churches, to Fairchild Air Force Base, and you identify resources that exist that people don't know what to do with them. You know, I just got a call from STA last night. They're gonna give away 6 12 to 15 passenger vans. So there's 6 to 12 passenger vans that are going to be unloaded onto the community. They're assets and they're going to try to figure out, what do we do with these? We got to give them away. What a problem to have. So if the students went among the community and identified resources and unleashed resources, and then spent the year trying to figure out where do we direct those resources in a unified effort to meet the needs that, instead of going at it from a needs perspective and filling needs, you try and identify strengths. You go amongst the community and find out where the strength is. Then you help capitalize on that. Because right now those strengths are lying dormant and unconnected. They're latent. So you uncover them, the treasure that's in Spokane, and use your students to have those conversations and those relationships. That could be a structure that you use, and it could be wide. You could have a wide swath when you've got that many students dispersed among the community.
I mean, I'll just offer too, as an organization that's probably the most process-oriented, if you will, in contrast to the delivery of most of the other organizations. Sincerely, we'll offer to you as you put your group together, whatever way we can help in that. Very glad to help, and I would tell you, frankly, that the perspective is about the community, and that we would try and assist you to understand what are some of those, the broad scope of what needs to happen, and help try and focus that in whatever way is possible. Because I'm going to also tell you, it ain't easy. In fact, it's really, really hard, but you're doing the right things, and I really want to reinforce the point that because you're doing it now, creates so much value for yourselves and as a community long term. That's just what's so cool about what's happening, and to continue that, even though it's struggle occasionally to figure out how do you do this. It'll always be that way, but you're working at it, and that's very, very cool.
Since we're past 9:30, first I want to thank everyone, including the students, for coming here, the community members. We know you're busy. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love to have said, hey, come to our meeting, and you guys can't. I was impressed. I was telling Teresa earlier, I said, shouldn't we add some more people? Because some can't come. She's like, well, let's see. And everyone we invited came. So that was awesome, especially this year. And thank you. This has been immensely helpful, I think, in terms of getting some conversation going. If you don't mind, I might forward on some of your emails and contact to the students in case they want to follow up or say, hey, to do that. And then kind of one last thing to the Knights and students in the room, because Jerry talked about spectacular possibilities, and it got me thinking, I mean, what you guys do is amazing, but there is so much untapped potential in terms of juniors, seniors, and alumni. I mean, you guys develop energy in an organization if you wanted to. You don't have to, but I may help explore this with people. I mean, your juniors and senior students here don't get involved. You have alums. Well, I have a friend from 12 years ago who's in the community. Money, time, resources to really have that, if you want to, that spectacular impact, because it is more, I mean, I think you guys are seeing that it is more than just sophomores, and we can keep it that way, but I think we're asking if you guys keep wanting to be bigger to be that. So I think there's some cool possibilities in that long-term vision or goal to expand upon that. It's just sophomores working with assets in the community, and assets you guys have developed, people who were in here 2 years ago, 10 years ago, that are still around. Basically all we've done is sent them letters saying, hey, will you give us money? I think if we start building that connection, some might give more than money or give more money or show back up or help sit on an advisory board.
Yeah, help build your group that way.
And on the advisory board thing we're developing, I think in the draft we do have a spot for a community member. In that group right now, we're hypothetically would meet once a month. It would mainly consist of former members of the community. We talked about adding a community member just as another person to give advice to the group. Tell us what you're doing.
Somebody from the organization, if you continue to work with one organization, so somebody from UGM would be on that board, just as the community member that narrows down to what organization.
I think that's how, I can't remember the draft, I think that's actually how we have it written, but that'll probably continue. We're going to try it out probably sometime this year. Get it. Right now we have one with faculty and staff. We kind of can't commit that time, so we're going to hand it over to some former members to kind of help manage that with advisors. So thank you all very much. Finish off the food, take a last cup of coffee.